Force of friction. Lesson preview. Causes of friction. Factors affecting the force of friction. Kinds of friction. Friction, a necessary evil. Ways to increase and decrease friction. You must have seen that a ball rolling on the ground stops after some time. You must have wondered why it is that a vehicle slows down when brakes are applied. The stopping of ball or slowing down of a vehicle must be due to some force acting on these objects that is opposing their motion. This is the force of friction. Activity. Push a pencil box from one end of the table. What do you observe? It stops after moving a little distance. Repeat the activity from the opposite end of the table. The box again stops after moving a little distance. This shows that there is some force acting on the box that opposes its motion. Friction is the force that resists motion when the surface of one object comes in contact with the surface of another object. It always opposes the relative motion between the two surfaces. Friction always acts in a direction opposite to the direction of motion. If force is applied along the left, friction acts along the right, and vice versa. In both cases, friction opposes the motion. The force of friction tends to stop a moving object, tends to prevent a stationary object from moving. Hence, friction can also be defined as a force that slows down moving objects or prevents stationary objects from moving. Causes of friction. Reasons for the force of friction between two surfaces in contact. No solid surface is perfectly smooth. There are a large number of irregularities present on the two surfaces in contact. Some surfaces are rougher than others. In other words, all solid surfaces are rough, only the degree varies. When a body moves over another surface, the irregularities in the two surfaces come in contact with each other and oppose the relative motion between the two bodies. The force of friction is greater if the rough surface has more irregularities. Thus, friction is caused due to interlocking of irregularities in the two surfaces. Frictional force acts opposite to the applied force. Force of friction. Force. Surface irregularities. Surface irregularities. Force of adhesion. When two rough surfaces come in contact with each other, there are a few places where the two surfaces meet. The atoms or molecules present at the point of contact attract each other due to electrostatic forces. It is this force of adhesion which opposes the motion of the two bodies. This gives rise to frictional force. Factors affecting the force of friction. The force of friction is dependent on the smoothness or roughness of the surfaces in contact. Activity. Make a stack of 3 to 4 books with the help of a string. Pull it with the help of a spring balance as shown in the figure. Note down the reading in the spring balance when the bundle moves. Now try pulling the same stack of books after wrapping it in A. Polythene cover, B. Jute cloth. Do you notice any variation in the readings? You will notice that the reading will be higher for rough surface, jute cloth, in comparison with the smooth surface, polythene cover. The above activity shows that smooth surfaces offer lesser friction than rough surfaces. Thus, we can easily conclude that the force of friction depends on the nature of the surfaces in contact. Activity. Make an inclined plane on a table by placing books and a plyboard piece as shown in the figure. Put a mark on the plyboard piece. Now roll a pencil from this mark. Note down the distance it moves before coming to rest. Now place a tablecloth on the table and repeat the activity. You can experiment with different surfaces. Remember to maintain the same inclination in all the activities. In which case did the pencil travel maximum distance, and why? Can you guess? From the above activity it is seen that the distance traveled by the pencil is more on a smooth surface than on a rough surface. We can thus conclude that rough surfaces exert greater frictional force than smooth surfaces. The force of friction is directly proportional to the weight of the body which moves on a horizontal surface. Activity. Take a brick, place it on the floor and push it. Now take 2 bricks placed one on top of the other and push them. Repeat with 3 bricks. What do you observe? Can you push all the 3 bricks by applying the same force as in case of 1 brick? Note down your observations. The force of friction increases with the increase in the mass of the object. From the above activity it is seen that as the mass of the object increases, the force of friction also increases. Kinds of friction. There are 3 kinds of friction: static friction, sliding friction, rolling friction. Static friction. Static friction is a force that keeps an object at rest. It can be explained as the force of friction which precisely balances the applied force for the duration of the stationary state of the body. The static frictional force is a self-regulatory force, i.e., static friction will always be equivalent and opposite to the force applied. Sliding friction. The force required to keep an object moving with the same speed is a measure of sliding friction. Sliding friction is slightly less than static friction. This is the reason why it is easier to move a box which is already in motion than to move the one which is at rest. Rolling friction. The force of friction offered when rolling an object on the surface of another object is called rolling friction. Rolling friction is less than sliding friction. Friction offered by a rolling marble is an example of rolling friction. Do you know why it is easier to pull a suitcase having wheels? This property is used in designing ball bearings. Ball bearings reduce friction. They are used in machines where rotatory motion is required. Small metal balls are placed between moving surfaces to reduce friction. Examples: use of ball bearings between hubs and axles of ceiling fans and bicycles. Wheels make it easier to pull a suitcase. Ball bearings reduce friction. Activity. Let us now see that rolling friction is less than sliding friction. With the help of this activity, take 4 cylindrical pencils and place them parallel to each other on a table. Place a book over the pencils as shown in the figure. The pencils act as rollers. Now push the book. What do you observe? The book moves easily. You can see the pencils rolling as the book moves. Now remove the pencils and slide the book. Do you have to apply more force? From the above activity it can be easily concluded that rolling friction is less than sliding friction. Air exerts frictional force on objects moving through it. Similarly, water and other liquids also exert force of friction on objects moving through them. The frictional force exerted by fluids, liquids and gases is also called drag. The force of friction between a solid and a fluid is less than that between 2 solids. The frictional force on an object in a fluid depends on its speed in comparison to that of the fluid. Shape of the object. Nature of the fluid. You have studied in the previous classes that birds and fish have streamlined bodies. This shape offers the least resistance to friction, and thereby they lose less energy. Taking a clue from this, scientists have also streamlined the bodies of aeroplanes, ships, and boats. Similarity in the shape of an aeroplane and a bird. Friction, a necessary evil. Friction causes a lot of energy to be wasted. It is due to friction that moving parts of machines and automobiles heat up. When you rub your palms vigorously together, you must have seen heat being produced. This is due to friction. Can you give a few examples where friction produces heat? When a mixer or grinder is run, the jar becomes hot. Heating results in wastage of energy as well as fuel. Friction also causes wear and tear of moving parts of a machine. But on the other hand, it has a lot of advantages. We are able to walk, run, play, etc. due to friction between the ground and the soles of our footwear. This is the reason why patterns or grooves are made on the soles of shoes to increase friction. This prevents the person from slipping. Can you now guess why it is easier to write on a plain paper than on a glazed/waxed paper? It is due to friction between the road and the surface of tires that you are able to drive safely. If there was no friction, automobiles could not be started, or stopped or turned to change direction of motion. You are able to tie a knot or fix a nail on the wall due to friction. Without friction, you will not be able to sit on a chair or write, or construct a building. You will also not be able to hold on to things. If a vessel is greasy or has a film of oil on it, it is difficult to hold it. Therefore, we can conclude that friction is a necessary evil. Fixing of nail on a wall due to friction. Ways to increase and decrease friction. Ways to increase friction. Soles of shoes have grooves on them. Grooved soles offer more friction to the ground, which gives better grip while walking. Tires of automobiles have treads for better grip over the road. The brake pads lining in automobiles are made rough. These brake pads do not touch the wheel when you ride a bicycle, but when brakes are applied, they arrest the motion of the rim due to friction. Wrestlers and kabaddi players apply soil on their hands for better grip of their opposition due to friction. Similarly, gymnasts also apply a coarse powder before performing. Ways to decrease friction. By applying oil or grease on the surface. When you apply oil or grease between the moving parts of a machine, a thin layer is formed between the two surfaces, and as such the two surfaces do not directly rub against each other. The movement becomes smooth as interlocking of the two surfaces is avoided to a large extent. The substances which reduce friction are called lubricants. Examples: applying oil on the hinges of the door, oiling a sewing machine, or applying grease on the moving part of a motor or a bicycle makes their functioning smooth. Do you know why we tend to slip on a floor if oil or soap solution has been spilled on it? By using ball bearings. Ball bearings change sliding friction to rolling friction. The force of friction when a body is rolled on a surface is much less than when it is pushed on a flat surface. Small metal balls made of stainless steel, brass or ceramic are placed between moving parts to reduce friction. By sprinkling a soft, fine powder on the surface. This is the reason why talcum powder is sprinkled on carom boards and graphite powder is applied to the moving parts of a machine. By polishing the surface. Polishing the surface helps to smoothen rough surfaces, thereby reducing friction. Remember one thing, friction can only be minimized but not entirely eliminated, i.e. it can never be reduced to zero.